Hi, my name is Gil Gordon. I'm a Senior Advisor and Managing Director at RI Newcastle and Lower Hunter. Last night, the Federal Treasurer handed down the 2025 budget, which was one that was somewhat of a surprise, as they expected the Prime Minister to call an election before the need for the budget was announced. But nonetheless, I want to give you a quick run through on what's in the budget and how it affects predominantly retirees. I also want to talk about what's not in the budget and also what the likely response from the Treasurer of the Opposition is. Sorry, the Leader of the Opposition. So let's start with the tax cuts. So from July next year, the lowest tax rate will drop from 16% to 15% and then 14% for the first between $20,000 and $45,000 a year. What this means is it's going to provide us with a $5 a week tax break. It depends on what income you're receiving and so forth. The most interesting part about this is they've really removed any incentive for people to salary sacrifice to superannuation if they earn $45,000 or under. What this really means is that people are going to put less into super, spend a little bit more. So it's a cost of living support. It's not going to be huge. Depends a little bit on how much you earn, but the real thrust of this question at the moment around tax reform is bracket creep. As Australians' wages are growing year by year, they don't index the tax thresholds to allow the amount of tax the government's paying to basically stay the same. So what we've seen in the last 3 years, particularly the Labor government, is a massive increase in the income tax take that they've received, which has funded a lot of their spending programs. Curiously, I was looking into this just the other day, and there is only one example in the last 50 or 70 years where the federal government attempted to increase the tax thresholds each year by inflation to stop the bracket creep problem. That lasted 18 months before the government turned it off. It was simply costing them too much money. The next thing that the government's introducing is a Medicare levy increase. Now, this is a really small thing. It's a very tiny increase to singles. If they earn less than $24,000, they pay no Medicare, up to $26,000. And what it really means is the low-income earners get a little bit more, 2% more in their take-home wages. If they're working, age pensioners, it has no effect because you don't pay Medicare if you're on an age pension. On a good news, the government has continued to freeze Social Security deeming rates. So that's the first $80,000 if you're in a couple. I think it's up to $100,000 now, only assumed to have earned 0.5%, and beyond that, you're deemed to earn 2.25%. They've been quite generous with this. They think that this is going to help between 450,000 age pensioners and about 420,000 others. They've been quite generous in leaving this down where it is because as interest rates have climbed, it would be quite easy, and it is easy if you've got a spare $10,000 or so to go out there and find about a 5% term deposit rate. The government's only assessing you at 2.25%. So it's a nice little win for pensioners, but it's not going to make a huge difference. Many pensioners were not really being penalised too much under what's called the income test. The asset test still tends to be the one that's costing them money. In addition, and this is for younger clients, your children or your grandchildren, they're going to provide more support for housing, and it's going to come in the form of an expansion of the Help to Buy or family home guarantee schemes. Largely, it translates to the government helping a few more kids buy their houses. It's about $1.5 billion over 8 years, and they're willing to take up to 30, maybe even 40% if you build the house from scratch, equity in your home to make it easier to buy. I'm not sure that this scheme is being taken up a lot by people, largely because people don't want to be sharing the ownership of their home with people, but nonetheless, it's there. Now, there is a plus with childcare expansion. Now, what it means is that your your children and your grandkids will get a minimum of 3 days of subsidised childcare per week, regardless of work hours, 72 hours a fortnight, or 36 hours a week. It's about 12 hours that they're assuming that the child might be supported by the childcare. So what they're doing is sorry, I don't know if I said free, but they're subsidising your childcare for 3 days a week, which is good. Now, energy costs, which is a real hot topic, they're extending the energy rebate, which I understand it lowers your cost of living, but it's really important to understand that, and to a certain extent, the federal opposition's right here. What they're doing is taking money from you on one hand and then giving it back on the other. The net effect is a slightly easier cost of living. And you'll receive $150 in additional rebates up to December this year. I think that's in 2 quarterly payments. But the government's really giving you your own money back, so that's fine. Now, to people that are thinking about superannuation, there is a move to make superannuation payments paid weekly, like your salary. So from 1 July 2026, superannuation will be paid with every paycheck, which might be fortnightly or weekly. It's not really going to affect your retirees. It will help younger clients who are going to get the money in super just that little bit earlier, allowing better long-term growth. It's a bit like paying your mortgage off weekly rather than monthly. It will work out. At the moment, the employer is only obliged to pay it monthly or quarterly, so it does improve things. On a probably less relevant note, the tax office is getting an extra $1 billion over the next 4 years to chase down tax dodgers. It's really targeting multinationals and high net wealth individuals. It will affect those of you with complex investments, engagements with companies and family trusts a little bit. And we recommend that you have a discussion with your accountant just to make sure that everything's squeaky clean. The good news is they tend to talk to the accountants before they talk to you. So it's not likely to be a big problem unless you're doing clever things, in which case talk to your accountants. Now, there's no specific aged care and health changes, health insecurity. There's problems in the aged care sector. They've already committed an existing $1.4 billion over 13 years to medical research, but that's not going to really change the kind of problems that people face as they deal with the 2 or 3 years of aged care for their family. They are improving things, but it's no new surprises there. Now, Job Seeker Boost, there'll be a $41 million extension for job seeker payments by at least about $55 a fortnight for those who can't work more than 14 hours a week due to disability. And really that makes it just a little bit easier for those that are struggling. It's not a big number, but it is what it is. So really from a financial planner's point of view, there's basically no changes to superannuation contribution laws, the way the government's assessing your super, if you're entitled to any Centrelink support or anything like that. It's a bit of a small target budget. I think most of the big changes have come out already with the announcements by the Prime Minister of $8 billion for Medicare and things like that. So I'm just going to have a little bit of a chat about what's not in the budget. So there's no major changes to superannuation, which is a good thing. It's something that the governments of the country have been very strong at. No, they can't leave the bucket of money alone, to be honest. So you can continue to make contributions to super, $120,000 a year or $30,000 a year of tax-deductible contributions. You can still drag them forward. You can drag forward unused contributions if your super is under $500,000. So it's good. There's not really any support for small business. They've extended the instant asset write-off to $20,000 up to 30 June, but there's virtually nothing in there for small business. And that saddens me because small business is really the largest employer in the country. The government over the last 3 years has really tightened up some of the workplace rules, which give a lot of power to employees, a lot of obligations to employers. Frustrates me as a small business owner, but it is what it is. They've really done nothing here. Now, again, in aged care, despite there being a need for aged care here, there's not really any major changes. So it's one of those things that, generally speaking, I would say to your clients, to your family, get into this question early. If you're in your 70s, start talking about it with your spouse and your kids. If your parents are in the 70s or 80s, start talking about it with them. It's going to happen. Hopefully it doesn't, but it is going to happen to a certain percentage of people. So it's important that older people live closer to support. It might be in an aged care facility with a transition plan into residential care. It might simply be closer to doctors and closer to family. But this conversation really matters by the time clients hit 80, and by the time they're in their mid-80s to late 80s, it becomes a dominant thing for many people, and they really don't like being a burden on their children. So I strongly advocate that older Australians have the conversation and move houses while they're still young enough to adapt. It's much harder in your 80s to do this, and you can become much more of a burden on your kids. Now, I know that's what family's for, but at the same time, a plan well executed is far better than a crisis plan. Now, there's no particular changes to age pension rates. It's indexed every 6 months. With inflation still a factor, it's making things a bit harder, but there's no noise on that. And lastly, there's no immediate action on climate change funding. Now, this is to do with solar panels and wind farms. It's been a very expensive part of the current government's agenda, and I'm pleased to see that they're not putting more money into that. We're in a space where we need to focus on the shorter term needs of people, I think, and the cost of living. It's a tough budget to criticise in that sense. All right, things that the opposition leader is likely to talk about. He's very likely to criticise the income tax as being way less than they need to be. I think he's already described it as I think it might have been Angus Taylor described it as a cruel hoax, giving people a little bit of money back that the government's taken through bracket creep. The federal opposition is definitely going to focus on what they call economic mismanagement. The rising debt, up to $42 billion a year increase in the next financial year, sees, I mean, the government's spending as a percentage of GDP has gone from 23 to 26%, which is huge. I'm a big believer in some of the discussion around the need for us to spend a bit more on defence to make sure China doesn't think that we're an easy mark. I would rather see some of that spending instead of going to some of the more left-wing policies. I think some old-fashioned strengthening of defence would be a far better use of the money. So expect a fair amount of criticism of that from Peter Dutton, because it does have longer-term consequences. Dutton may reaffirm that they're going to allow our kids to use the super to place a deposit on a home. This is going to be for the younger voters, and I'm not opposed. Excuse me. I'm not opposed to the idea. Now, the Labor government wants to buy part of the house with you. Liberal opposition is really thinking about letting you use your super to buy into a home. We're going to get a conversation around stronger borders. Liberal's going to highlight Labor allowing, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of new immigrants in each year, about 6,000 a week at the moment. It's really putting pressure on the housing market, and it places a lot of pressure on infrastructure like roads and bridges and hospitals and things like that as well. schools. So all of this is a complex web, and I think we're in a place right now where we need to probably show a bit of fiscal discipline rather than focus on what the government can do for us. It's going to be a big focus on energy. The opposition's come out with a nuclear policy, which is going to be expensive. From what I can gauge, if you get past all the rhetoric, the cost of a nuclear plan, according to the Liberal opposition, is about the same as what the government is spending on the green energy plan. So it's going to be a very politically contentious subject, but it is what it is. So really, for over 50s, there's a little bit of a tax cut. There's a little bit of a Medicare reduction. Your age pension and deeming in the age pension world is not changing, which is good. Stability is good there. The ATO is going to look at more complex structures and family trusts. For families, we're going to get a better childcare environment, slightly more job seeker if you're doing it tough, and a little bit of energy rebate to help the average home. And Dutton's going to really hammer the theme of economic mismanagement, trying to give a reasonable alternative. I think they're playing a small game. There's a lot of things they could do, but he's going to counterpoint Liberal as a better manager of the national economy than Labor. So talk about those things with your family. Honestly, this budget is a bit of a fizzer. I don't know that you're going to see a lot of change or anything that's going to affect you very much. Minor increase in take-home money if you're paying tax, but that's about all. So from Retire Invest, I think it's business as usual. For us, if you have any questions, please ring us, ring your advisor. We're more than happy to answer it. Any of the advisors, Steve, Paul, Chris, Ryan, or myself, will be more than happy to take questions. So take care. God bless. Talk soon.